These walls were completed in 1618. Been around ever since. They've withstood 3 sieges and never been taken. The Great Siege in 1688 to 1689, these walls stood and were never breached. And in fact today these walls are still complete. A great tourist attraction today. And it's a symbol for the apprentice boys that as long as these walls stand, democracy is going to stand in the world. It was on these walls that 13 young citizens in this city stood against the authority of a king. Okay, they were trying to defend their lives at the time, but what they actually did here, the siege that began here, then led to the succession of William III and Mary II onto the British throne. And they passed 2 very important Acts of Parliament, which today, the Act of Settlement in 1701 and the Bill of Rights 1689, which still exist. And these are the foundation stones for democracy in the world today.
We were reared in, you can see it here, 38 Lima Street, which is the last of those steep streets running down the hill and down into the valley of the bog. Growing up there in Lima Street and growing up in what became known as the Bogside, you're very much aware of another worldness up here, all of the places of significance and importance, people who made decisions as it were up on the hill. You know, the walls were there, the Apprentice Boys Hall was there, Governor Walker was there on top of the 80-foot Doric column, and on the 18th of December each year, you know, dangling from that was the effigy of Lundy. And it was amazing, you know, that you could see this lit up the dark December day, and skyrockets and so on into the sky. So you knew that Christmas was near, and you also knew somehow you didn't belong to any of that. That was them, and that was the people who were the overlords. Every symbol of overlordship was here. And then, of course, the 12th of August parade, I mean, what the people in this area all did for the 12th of August, burnt their chimneys on that day, so that as much smoke as possible would come up to annoy people as they're marching along here.
August 1969. The disaffected Catholic population of the Bogside took to the streets to confront the Royal Ulster Constabulary in the wake of a Protestant apprentice boys parade in the city. The violence, which was a manifestation of long-standing political grievances, was so extreme that in an unprecedented step, British troops were deployed into Derry. This decision by the British government under Prime Minister Harold Wilson was to shape the future of Northern Ireland for over 30 years.
Well, I mean, I think I was always aware of the presence of the walls, even as a child. You know, I was very conscious that the walls were kind of up there, and you know, I was living in the Bogside at the time, so I don't really know if I had the language really at that time to articulate what that meant politically or historically, but I was just very conscious that the walls were something that was very real, very alive, and not historical at all. The walls became a kind of focal point for me, you know, so a lot of the work that I made in the mid-80s really was about trying to kind of understand how the terrain here works, both what it feels like but what it means strategically. Just that kind of sense of the walls functioning as a kind of mechanism of surveillance and control was very, very real, you know, experience. So for me, the kind of visual dominance that they had in my life as a child didn't disappear when I became an adult, and it became so pressing that I really felt as if I had to address it in some way. I was always struck by the kind of historical mistake I think that the British Army made when they kind of reoccupied the walls after 1969, so it seemed to be a kind of reassertion of a kind of colonial position in some way, you know. For me, the camera was kind of implicated in that whole kind of process, because I always kind of felt when I was kind of walking through the Bogside that I was being watched in some way. And then when I started using the camera, it was almost as if I could turn the camera back on the walls, so almost like to kind of reverse the gaze in some way. Both of these photographs are taken from a position that kind of mimics surveillance cameras on the wall looking down on the bog side. So for me, trying to kind of replicate that position and trying to both kind of undermine it and kind of interrogate it in some way were strategies that I was really kind of actively interested in at that time. Another work that I made on the walls is a black and white photograph with text, and the work's called Shifting Ground. The photograph really kind of reflects that idea of them being completely closed down by a series of what looked like really ad hoc security measures, like all kinds of wire meshes and corrugated sheeting and scaffolding. And at the same time, the idea, which I think was still alive in my mind, was that that wasn't permanent, that this was shifting ground, that the status of the walls and the meaning of the walls could change.
The Apprentice Boys today are trying to educate people and get back to where this all started from. And we acknowledge that due to perceptions there have been difficulties in more recent times, but in the last 10 to 15 years the Apprentice Boys have been working hard through the museum and through their Maiden City Festival in the summer to try and open it out and to encourage the wider population of all denominations and backgrounds to participate. And I think in recent times you see the various school groups from all different backgrounds, Catholic and Protestant schools, celebrating what the walls mean to them.
I definitely think it is very important that young people know about the history of the city and the walls in particular, as they were a key part of Derry's past, and they'll probably be a key landmark for many years to come.
I think it's extremely important as a young person today that we should be educated and understand what the walls mean to us and what it symbolises and the history of the walls.
Not being from Derry myself, whenever I moved here I didn't know a lot about it, and to this day I still don't, so I think it is very important that children grow up and learn about such an historic landmark.
I view the walls anyway as being mostly a tourist attraction, simply because for teenagers there's not really that much to do on the walls. If you want to go for a walk it's a place to go, but there's not anything else really to do.
The walls mean a lot to me. They're an everyday thing to me. They're my surroundings because I live right beside the walls on Bishop Street. And just generations of my family have always lived in Derry, so I've always heard stories about Derry, like the Derry walls. And I was like, when you're growing up, you just hear your mama, your dad, or your granny and granddad telling you about the history of the wall, so that's how I learned.
I think it's really interesting how things have changed since 1969 and since the Troubles here, to a situation now where it's possible that the walls can become a symbol of healing, of division between the two communities. And I think that's the role that they can play, that the walk around the walls can be a walk of healing between former enemies, that you come to this city as a sort of a pilgrimage to move on to a new place of diversity.
The walls themselves hold so much history that I think division will always be around in Derry no matter what. However, in saying that, I think especially in modern times with integrated schools and the vast majority of my friends being Catholic, that division does not stay there and that it has faded away, and the divide in Derry is nowhere near as strong as it used to be.
I feel that to some extent the walls can bring us together, but I know that many people look at it as a barrier to stop bringing people together, and so this might prevent us from mixing and coming as one rather than two different communities.
The walls have always, in the past, symbolised conflict between Catholics and Protestants, but nowadays I don't think that there is much division in the city, as there's more cross-community activities happening between Catholics and Protestants, such as integrated schools and cross-community activities like football. But I definitely feel that there is reconciliation happening within the walls.
I think they can be a part of reconciliation in the city, but I don't think that they can be used solely on their own, simply because I think it will take a lot more than celebrating history to bring everybody together again, because I think the scars of what happened in Derry run too deep in some people's minds anyway, so I think it's going to take a lot of time, dedication and commitment from other people in the city to make it a place where it could help with reconciliation.
Maybe it's the time that we should move on and maybe start to give the walls a new meaning, such as not a place where there was war or there was a split or divide in the city, but a place where people can look at it as a place to relax, or a place where people come together and just forget about all the problems that happened in the past. But then again, the walls is a part of our culture, and it's our history, so maybe they should be aware of the importance of the walls and what they mean to the older generations in our city.